The music faded into silence. A spotlight swept across the stage, landing on a small figure near the edge. Ethan Whitmore, 11 years old, braces locked tight around his legs. He stood trembling, eyes wide. From the shadows behind the curtains, Maya Jefferson, wearing a faded janitor's uniform, took a single step forward. The audience held its breath. And then Ethan raised his hand toward her. Richard Whitmore had built empires by controlling everything: markets, meetings, people. But nothing had prepared him for the silence that followed his son's accident. Ethan, once bursting with life, now moved through the world behind metal and silence. Richard kept him away from cameras, crowds, even music, especially music. It reminded them both of who was missing. That night at the gala wasn't supposed to be different. The orchestra was scheduled, the speeches rehearsed. Ethan was to sit still, quietly, like always. But something changed. A woman no one noticed stepped out of the shadows. Not a doctor, not a therapist, a janitor. And Ethan reached for her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. This is the story of how one unexpected gesture unraveled years of silence and forced a powerful man to confront what he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. But in that moment, Richard had no idea what was coming next. Maya Jefferson knew how to move without being seen. It was a survival skill, learned from years of cleaning spaces she could never afford to enter. Each morning, before the first light touched the polished floors of the Whitmore Cultural Center, Maya had already mopped them. Alone, in silence, long before anyone else arrived. No one asked where she went after hours. No one knew about the cramped apartment in East Side or the community room where she taught movement therapy to kids with disabilities twice a week. They just saw a janitor. Once Maya had different dreams. She had studied physical education with a focus on adaptive movement, hoping to one day open a center of her own. But life and bills and a mother who needed care all pulled her dreams into the shadows. Still, she never stopped watching. She noticed the way Ethan Whitmore avoided eye contact, the way his father spoke about him instead of to him, the way Ethan's fingers twitched whenever music played in the background, how he seemed to want to move but didn't dare. She understood that longing. She had seen it in her students, in herself. Richard Whitmore had passed by Maya 100 times. Never once looked her in the eye. He walked through the world like the silence around him was intentional, like connection was a luxury he didn't need, until that night. The gala was pristine, choreographed like a symphony of wealth and reputation. Maya had been assigned to the backstage area to mop up a spill, nothing more. She was almost invisible behind the velvet curtain when the music shifted, and she saw Ethan push himself up from his seat. His knees shook. The braces on his legs resisted every motion. He stared forward, unblinking, and then he moved toward the edge of the stage. A whisper of panic crossed the backstage crew, but no one moved, except Maya. She stepped out, slowly, instinctively, not to catch him, not to fix him, just to be there, at his pace. The moment froze, and that was when everything began to unravel. Maya never planned to step into the light. All she ever wanted was a space where children like Ethan could move freely, without shame, without limits. Not just stretch their muscles, but stretch the world's expectations of them. That dream had lived quietly in a battered notebook tucked under her bed. Sketches of floor plans, class ideas, names of potential volunteers. She called it the movement room, even though it didn't exist. Not yet. When Ethan reached his hand toward her that night, Maya didn't think of the consequences. She thought of every child who had been told to sit still, stay quiet, behave. She thought of her students, of her younger self. She took his hand. He moved, slowly, shakily, guided not by her strength, but by her presence. 3 steps, that's all. 3 imperfect, beautiful steps. The crowd stared. Someone gasped. Maya didn't hear the music anymore, just Ethan's breath and her own heartbeat. Then a voice cut through the silence like a blade. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Richard Whitmore stood near the front row, his voice low but furious. The spotlight found him without trying. Maya froze, still holding Ethan's hand. "This is a formal event," he said, stepping closer. "This is not a playground." Ethan flinched, shrinking back. Maya let go of his hand gently. "I'm sorry," she said, though she wasn't sure what for. The next morning, she was called into Miss Ross's office. The director of operations wouldn't meet her eyes. "There was a complaint," she said quietly, "from Mr. Whitmore's office." Maya didn't argue. She just nodded, signed the termination paper and handed over her badge. Walking out of the building felt like sinking, not because of the job, she had lost those before, but because of the moment. It had meant something, not just to her, to Ethan, maybe even to Richard, though he'd never admit it. She told herself it was fine. She'd find something else. She always did. Back in her apartment, she opened her notebook and stared at the name scrawled across the top. The Movement Room. She hadn't written in it for months. Maybe it was time to put it away for good. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice insisted, "You were right to take his hand." The days after the gala blurred together like rain on glass. Maya took on temp work at a laundromat and late-night shifts at a downtown diner. Anything to keep the lights on. Her mother's medication cost more each month, and the rent was already overdue. At the diner, customers snapped their fingers for service and never made eye contact. One man left a tip in coins and told her to smile more. She did not. She couldn't. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the silence. No one mentioned the gala. Not her friends, not her co-workers, not even her sister Vanessa, who usually caught every whisper in the neighborhood. It was as if the moment had been erased, like Maya never stepped onto that stage, never took Ethan's hand, never tried. And then came the letter. Folded twice, delivered with casual cruelty. Notice of eviction. She stared at it for a long time, as if the ink would change if she blinked enough. Her mother's soft breathing from the next room kept her grounded. Barely. That night, Maya sat alone in the kitchen, flipping through her old notebook. Pages once full of color now looked pale, distant. Every idea felt naive, every dream too expensive. The pen in her hand hovered over the trash can. She almost dropped the notebook in, almost. Across the city, Richard sat in his office long after his staff had gone home. Ethan had refused his physical therapy session that morning, again. Instead, the boy spent hours playing the same piece of music on repeat, over and over, not loud, just enough to be heard through the walls. Richard hadn't heard Ethan speak a full sentence in days, but something had changed. He moved differently now. He asked to go outside more. He watched the front door like he was waiting for someone. Richard knew who. He tried to ignore it, he really did, but that night when he caught his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window, he saw something he hadn't expected. A man who had built an empire but couldn't face his own son. The next morning, Maya returned from her third shift of the day to find an envelope taped to her apartment door. No logo, no name, just her name written in careful block letters, Maya Jefferson. Inside was a small, folded piece of paper. "He wants to see you. Saturday, 2 p.m., back entrance. No one else will know." There was no signature. She stared at it for a long time. It could be a trick, a setup, another humiliation waiting to happen. But in the quiet of her kitchen, she thought of Ethan, how his hand had trembled in hers, how he had looked at her like she wasn't invisible. And that memory, more than the letter, kept her from tearing the message apart. Have you ever done something right and been punished for it anyway? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes your story might be the one someone else needs to hear today. Saturday came with overcast skies and the kind of stillness that makes you listen harder. Maya almost didn't go. She stood in her kitchen for too long, staring at the clock, then at her mother asleep on the couch. She had worn her plainest clothes, no makeup, no expectation. At 1:52 p.m., she stepped onto the bus with the note still folded in her pocket. The back entrance of the Whitmore Cultural Center was cold and sterile, nothing like the warmth of the community room where she used to teach. She half expected a security guard to block her path, but instead, Ethan was waiting. He sat in his chair near the loading dock, bundled in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, a Bluetooth speaker beside him. No PR team, no cameras, just him and Richard. He stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, watching his son like a man holding a glass already cracked. "Thank you for coming," Richard said quietly. Maya didn't answer right away. She turned to Ethan. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked. Ethan nodded once, then pressed play. The same soft melody from the gala drifted out of the speaker. Maya dropped her bag gently to the ground and waited. Ethan didn't ask for help. He didn't reach out, but slowly, carefully, he moved. One brace-shifted step, then another. Maya mirrored him, not guiding, not correcting, just following his pace. Richard didn't speak, but something in his posture softened, the tight grip in his shoulders loosening as if watching something he hadn't let himself believe in. After a few steps, Ethan stopped. He looked at Maya and smiled, not wide, just enough to be real. That was all. They didn't dance. They didn't perform, but something between them had shifted. Maya picked up her bag and turned to leave. Richard stepped forward, hesitant. "Wait," he said. "There's something I'd like to show you if you have time." She looked at him for a long moment. He didn't look like a man offering power. He looked like a man asking to understand. Richard led Maya through a side hallway of the cultural center, down a corridor she'd never seen. The walls were bare, cold, silent. "This space was supposed to be for an archive project," he said. "Old performance footage. No one's using it." He pushed the door open to reveal a large, empty room. Wooden floors, high ceilings, dusty but full of light from a row of skylights above. "I thought maybe if you wanted to use it." Maya stepped inside slowly. The air smelled like old varnish and forgotten intentions. "You're offering me a room," she said. "I'm offering you a beginning," Richard replied. "You don't owe me anything, no contracts, no cameras, just if Ethan could come here, with others." She ran her fingers along the mirror on the far wall, dulled from years of neglect. She could see it. The kids, the music, the freedom. "I'd need mats," she said, "and proper floor supports, maybe some sensory tools." "Done," he said too quickly. Maya turned. "Don't try to fix this with money." He looked at her, surprised. "This isn't a branding opportunity," she continued. "It's about letting them move on their own terms, even if it looks messy, especially then." Richard nodded, slowly this time. That week, Maya cleaned the space herself. Vanessa came to help. So did 2 of her students, one in a wheelchair, another with a speech delay. Music filled the room again. Ethan returned, now not as a patient, but as a participant. The first class wasn't perfect. A speaker glitched, a parent interrupted. Ethan tripped twice, but he got up each time, and the smile he gave Maya afterward, that was enough. Richard began showing up every Thursday, leaning against the doorway during sessions. He didn't speak, just observed. Sometimes he'd take notes in a worn leather notebook. Maya noticed, but didn't comment. One afternoon he stayed behind. "This is working," he said. "We should expand it." Maya crossed her arms. "Define we. I could pitch it to the board, frame it as a pilot, get you funding, structure, visibility." "You mean control?" she interrupted. "No," he said, then hesitated. "Maybe, but not in the way you think." She walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I've had 3 proposals rejected by your foundation in the past. Same exact methods I'm using now." He blinked. "That was you?" "Yes." Silence. "You know why they were rejected?" she asked. "Because they weren't scalable. Because they didn't promise measurable outcomes. Because kids like mine didn't fit your image of success." Richard looked down, guilty. "I want to change that," he said finally. "Then start by not trying to own it." Before he could answer, Vanessa burst in, breathless. "Channel 8 is outside," she said. "Local news. They heard about the program. They want to interview someone." Maya froze. "Who told them?" Vanessa shrugged. "No idea. But they're here." Richard looked at Maya. She looked at Ethan, who was practicing near the wall with two younger kids, laughing. Maybe it was time, or maybe it was already too late to stop what had started. The makeshift studio buzzed with quiet energy. Chairs were lined up along the walls, cameras perched on tripods, and a small audience gathered, whispering in anticipation. Ethan stood backstage, his braces freshly adjusted, his hair combed back, but his fingers trembled. Maya knelt beside him. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "You're not here to prove anything." "I know," Ethan whispered, "but I want to." She smiled and gave him space. Richard sat in the back row, eyes fixed on the floor. His assistant had advised him to issue a formal statement, maybe highlight the Foundation's involvement. But none of that mattered right now. This wasn't his stage. The lights dimmed. The music began, a soft, pulsing rhythm. Ethan had chosen himself. The room quieted. And then, slowly, he stepped onto the floor. At first it was clumsy. One brace caught on a mat. His shoulders tensed. A few audience members held their breath, but Maya didn't move. She stayed near the side, arms crossed, watching. Not to intervene, but to trust. Ethan paused, adjusted, and tried again, and this time he moved with rhythm, not flawless, not rehearsed, but real. Then something unexpected happened. A younger girl with a prosthetic leg stood and joined him. Then another child with Down syndrome followed. The stage wasn't a performance anymore. It was a shared space. Together they moved, improvised, uncoordinated, joyful. And the room, rich donors, skeptical reporters, tired parents, broke into spontaneous applause. Richard's chest tightened. His son was in the center of it all, not hiding, not shrinking, leading. A reporter from Channel 8 stepped forward, microphone raised. "Mr. Whitmore, may I ask, what exactly is this program?" Richard stood slowly. His voice didn't carry the same weight it once did in boardrooms or interviews. "This," he said, looking at Maya, then at Ethan, "is the first time my son has ever felt like he didn't need fixing." He turned to Maya. "If she'll allow it," he continued, "the Whitmore Foundation will fund the creation of a permanent movement center. Under her leadership, no conditions, no branding, just space for this to grow." Gasps echoed through the room. Maya blinked, surprised. She nodded once. Ethan turned toward the audience, sweat on his forehead, but eyes glowing, and without prompting, he bowed. The room rose to its feet. That night, nothing in Richard's empire changed, but everything else did. 3 months later, the ribbon was cut. What used to be a dusty archive room had become the Whitmore Movement Center, though the plaque outside simply read, "Your rhythm, your pace, your space." Maya didn't attend the press launch. She was inside, leading a warm-up with a new group of children, including Ethan, who now walked with just one brace and carried himself like someone who no longer asked for permission. Vanessa had become the program's coordinator, and the waitlist grew by the week. Therapists and educators from across the state came to observe. But for Maya, it was never about recognition. It was about space. Richard still attended every Thursday, not to oversee, but to watch, to learn. He asked questions. Sometimes he swept the floor at the end of the day, quietly, almost reverently. He had stopped scheduling Ethan's life down to the minute. He had started listening. "I used to think leadership meant never stepping back," he told Maya one afternoon. "But maybe the real strength is in knowing when not to lead." Maya looked at him, her voice calm. "You didn't just give him space, Richard. You gave yourself permission to grow." As the music floated through the center and children danced in their own beautifully imperfect ways, one truth stood out, clearer than any mission statement. Some revolutions begin with a grand idea. Others begin with a small, trembling hand, held open in trust. Maybe you've been the quiet support in someone's life, standing just outside the spotlight, holding steady when it mattered most. Or maybe you're still waiting for someone to see you, to trust that your steps, however slow, however uncertain, are enough. Tell us in the comments. Has someone ever changed your path with a small, unexpected gesture? Or have you been that person for someone else? Your story might be exactly what someone needs to hear today, and if this story touched you, leave a like. It helps more people find stories that remind us of what truly matters. And if you believe in second chances, in unexpected heroes, and in movements that begin quietly, subscribe. Because we still have many stories to tell. Stories where a single moment can change everything.